Can I say, if this bill passes, insecure work will spread like wildfire across the country. Before I came to this place, I spent 12 years working as a lawyer in employment, industrial and public interest law, looking at exactly these kind of laws. So when a bill like this comes before the Parliament, you've got to look carefully at what the words will actually do in practice. Can I say, if this bill passes, insecure work will spread like wildfire across the country. That's because this bill does three key things. Even after the Better Off Overall test was dumped, which may have been an ambit claim from the government, I don't know, but even after that, this bill does three key things. The first is it lets employers call you casual even if you're not, and there's nothing you can do about it. The second is it spells the beginning of the end of full-time work contracts because it introduces into the system a new form of contract where the employer can employ you part-time and then lift your hours up or down as the employer wants. And the third thing that it does, that the government doesn't tell you about, is that it takes an already difficult process of bargaining for better wages and conditions and tilts it even further in the employer's favour, making it harder for you to ask in your workplace for what you're entitled to. And it does a number of other things as well, but I want to spend a bit of time talking about those three key things because the government won't tell you about them, but those three things, if they pass in this bill, will spread insecure work like wildfire across the country and change the face of the labour market in one of the most significant changes that we've seen for decades. Now, firstly, what does it do about casual employment? We already know in this country that insecure work is a massive problem, and we've seen that during COVID. We've seen people who are stuck on casual or insecure contracts forced to make that terrible decision of, do I come to work knowing that I'm sick and potentially put myself and others at risk, or do I stay home but miss out on pay because I'm a casual employee and I'm not entitled to sick leave? And we have seen the awful choices that people have been forced to make contribute to the spread of this virus. But we also know that casual and insecure work over many years, it's a virus for people's lives because it makes it difficult to plan. Not only plan what you're doing from week to week, but to plan your whole life. It makes it difficult to go to the bank manager and try and get a mortgage. It makes it difficult to decide the plans that you're making about a family if you don't have a secure income. So we know it's a problem already. This bill's going to make it worse. The first thing it's going to do is allow employers to say, you're a casual employee, even if you're not. And once the employer has said you're a casual employee, you can't challenge it, right? You can't challenge it. This bill will say, under the definition of casual employee, the definition of the casual employee says if the employer says you're a casual, you're a casual. That's basically it. So what that means is that the problem of insecure work is going to get worse. Because even if you are someone who works regularly, a regular span of hours for someone, even if in the ordinary circumstances you should be entitled to get sick leave, get annual leave, get all of those entitlements that come from being a part-time employee or a full-time employee, even if by law you're entitled to those things, it won't matter. Because the employer will have said at the start of your employment you're a casual, and then under this bill what the employer says goes. So the exploitation that we've seen of people where people who should be entitled to some sense of security and to some decent conditions like holiday pay and sick leave, they're going to be denied it simply because the employer says so. Simply because the employer says so. So that is reason number one why this bill should be opposed. Reason number two, that hasn't got a lot of attention but deserves to get a lot of attention, is that this bill is the beginning of the end of full-time employment contracts. At the moment, if you work more than 16 hours a week, say you work 30 hours a week, say you work 35 hours a week, 25, 30, 35, you might sign a contract or respond to a job ad that says your job is a 30-hour-a-week job, 25-hour-a-week job, 35-hour-a-week job. And you then get all your pay and conditions on that basis. And if you're asked to work more, you should get overtime, or you have the right to say no. But you know that that's how many hours a week you're going to get. This bill introduces a new form of employment contract that says the employer can put you on a minimum of 16 hours a week, and they can then go up or down after that basically at their whim, right? And not only are you not going to get any additional entitlements for working those extra hours, even though it actually counts as overtime, it's not going to hurt people who already work these part-time arrangements because they're going to end up with less money in their pocket. But it's a threat to people who've got full-time jobs as well. Because all of a sudden, if you're an employer, at the moment, instead of advertising a 30-hour-a-week job or a job that's got decent hours, you can now just offer a 16-hour contract and say, oh, look, from week to week, I'll give you the odd day here or there, basically at my whim. That is going to make it impossible for people to plan their lives. That is going to make it incredibly difficult to go and get a mortgage. It's going to make it, forget about even a mortgage, paying your rent, if you don't know from week to week how much you're earning, becomes even more difficult just paying the rent. So this problem that we've got in Australia at the moment, where only 4 out of 10 people working are under standard employment arrangements, is going to get worse. Is going to get worse because you will, firstly, if the employer says you're a casual even if you're not. And secondly, if you want to work a job with decent hours, the chances of doing that have now just been diminished because the employer has access to this new part-time flexible arrangement that's going to turn full-time or close to full-time jobs into a form of insecure work. And in the context where the government and the Reserve Bank and everyone says, geez, we'd like wages to be higher to get the economy going and for people to have more money in their pockets, this bill is going to drive down wages because people are going to feel less confident about coming and asking for the payment that they're entitled to because the employer is going to hold all the cards. And indeed, it's going to give them even more of the cards. And that's the third problem with this bill, is that under this bill, when you go and negotiate an enterprise agreement that the government says, well, that's your way to negotiate yourself above this really low award, when you go to negotiate an agreement under this bill, the employer no longer has to even show you the full agreement, right? You could be asked to sign up to something without the employer having to show you what the whole agreement actually is. All the employer needs to do under this is say, oh, when it comes to hours of work and changing your hours of work, you've got to abide by company policy. And you might think, well, I want to know what company policy is before I sign. They don't have to tell you now. If this bill goes through, they don't have to tell you. You're signing your rights away and giving the employer a blank cheque. And you might think, well, I'll tell you what, actually, that doesn't sound fair. I want to go and talk to my union and get advice about whether I should sign this agreement or not. What the government is doing under this bill is extending the amount of time that the employer has to tell you you're allowed to go to the union, right? So it's going to go out by a couple of weeks, from 14 days to 28 days, during which time the whole agreement might have been completed. So in other words, the employer's able to say, here, sign this deal, you've got to sign it, this is the only way you're going to get a modest pay rise. You might be signing your rights away. They don't have to tell you you've got the right to see a union. They'll tell you a month later you can go and see the union, but by that time it might all be done and dusted. So they have to tell you less. They don't even have to tell you what the agreement is that you're signing up to. They don't have to tell you that you can go and join a union before the bargaining may well be, in fact, concluded. But also, if you do enter into one of these agreements, when you take it to the Fair Work Commission to get it approved, there's a sneaky little clause in here that says the so-called minimum conditions of the National Employment Standards, that's meant to be the legal minimum that everyone is entitled to, the Commission can now basically apply a pretty rubbery test about whether the agreement goes below those. So they're changing the test about whether or not the agreement even meets the legal minimum in this country, So that is why I say, and I think anyone who understands industrial relations law and employment law who looks at this clause by clause can come to no other conclusion than to say that this bill is one of the biggest threats to secure employment we have seen for a very long time. This bill will spread insecure employment across this country like wildfire, even as, at the moment, insecure employment is at peak levels and posing a threat to people's ability to plan their lives. We already have too many people suffering from insecure jobs. And when the government says, oh, it's okay, unemployment is coming down because we're getting more people into jobs, what they don't tell you is that a big part of the growth in jobs is in crappy jobs where you work an hour or two a week. And people may not know this, but if you're employed for 1 hour a week, it counts in the statistics as being employed. Right? So we're seeing more and more people being put on in these crappy jobs, these low hours, these insecure jobs, and this bill is specifically designed to make it worse. So this bill has to be rejected. And I'd say to the members of the crossbench who are thinking about how to vote on this bill now that the boot test has been dropped, if this bill passes, there's going to be a flood of constituents coming in once this starts to bite, saying, why can't I get a full-time job anymore? Why am I only guaranteed part-time hours of work? Or why is it that I'm not a casual, but I'm told I'm a casual and I can't go to court to challenge it, or I can't go to the Fair Work Commission to challenge it? That's what would happen if this bill passes. So the devil is in the detail, and the detail is devilish, because it will change the face of the labour market in this country in the biggest reform that we've seen since WorkChoices, in a way that is designed to spread insecure work, drive wages down and drive conditions down. So on any sober analysis of this bill, even if you're someone who doesn't sit on a union or employer side and you just sit and look at this and say what's actually best for workers, as someone who's spent 12 years working in this area, can I say this legislation does a lot more than the government is saying, and it attacks some of the most fundamental things that we take for granted here about how work is organised in this country. And it is going to hurt people if this passes. It is going to hurt people. What I think we need to do, Mr Deputy Speaker, is scrap this bill and start again. What we need is to outlaw insecure work in this country. Insecure work has spread to the point where people don't have the ability to plan their lives in the way that they used to. We need to outlaw insecure work and get back to the point where every job is presumed to be ongoing unless there's good, sound business reasons otherwise. So if you're running a small business and your ice cream shop is only open over summer, then yeah, sure, you can put someone on for 3 months to go and work over summer as a casual or on a short-term contract. Of course, there's always going to be sensible reasons for it. But it's gone too far in this country. We have a situation now, I remember someone coming and giving evidence to an inquiry when I introduced a bill to tackle insecure employment several years ago. She worked at a university for close to 10 years without being entitled to a day of sick leave, even though she did the same job in basically the same department for 10 years because she was called a casual all of that time. There are so many people in this situation who are doing rolling contract after rolling contract, who are doing a bit of work here and a bit of work there. It's not just Uber drivers or food delivery drivers, it's happening everywhere now. It's happening in the aged care sector, where carers are being asked to come to care for someone in the morning, care for someone in the afternoon, and they don't get paid for the day in between. So stuff's up the whole day. You can't work or go and do another job, but you only get paid a couple of hours either end. We need to outlaw insecure work in this country We can't let insecure work spread like wildfire, which is what will happen if this bill passes. So we've got to oppose this bill.